loves our kids, we have opportunities like that to allow them to be a part of our time together. And I'm just reminded, honestly, I'm setting a time right away so you guys don't think like, hey, what is he doing? Because the clock isn't working down here. So if I don't set a timer, I'm going to be here past lunch. So, which would maybe anyway, but I'm going to try. No, but you see the joy in the kiddos is literally, I think, just kind of an expression, an overflow of what you guys pour into them as moms and dads, and what the volunteers down there pour into them week in and week out. Abby told me the other day, there's 30 of you guys, adults, who volunteer every single month in some fashion or another. Some once a month, some more often, but I mean, that's like half our adult church that goes down there at some point during the month and pours into the lives of our children, and we see it. They get up here and they say, God, I've got joy down in my heart, and they sing the B-I-B-L-E. And speaking of kids and volunteering as well, and I know Abby forgot last week, but summer is a tough time in Kids Connection to have workers. And so if you're like, hey, I don't know if I can work all year long, I got stuff going, but summer I might be able to plug a gap. Abby says, hey, listen, kid, if you can help me get a few folks that might even just say, hey, sign me up for the summer. I'll work a summer shift June, July, and August, because lots of us travel during the course of the summer, and we want to keep Kids Connection 1, 2, 3, and in that 4 or 5 combo class, all staffed, all safe, all learning about Jesus every week. And it just takes hands and feet. And so if you're like, hey, I can fill a gap for the summer, see Abby, she'll train you real quickly, she said, get you up and going, and then just slot you in a slot for the summer. But man, just neat to see our kids pouring out God's love. Secondly, First Friday is this Friday at Momax. The slide was up there earlier. It's a great time to hang out if you're just looking for dinner. Friday night, looking to see some folks from church. No agenda, no schedule. Kids are all, I call them caged in, but I think it's probably fenced in is the better word. But they're out there having a great time, and we just enjoy a sweet night of fellowship each time on Friday, the first Friday of each month. Something new that we're going to just throw to the mix as well. I'm going to throw out an opportunity for baptism. It's warm enough now. We can have outdoor baptism, whether that's in a pool, in a river, that kind of thing. So if you have followed Christ in terms of having a relationship with God, been restored through Jesus' life, death, and resurrection, but have never had an opportunity to publicly, after that, say, hey, you know what? I want to declare myself. I want to publicly identify myself as a follower of Jesus. And Jesus did it. And then he commanded you and I to do likewise. And so, man, if you've begun that relationship with God through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and have never had an opportunity to follow him in baptism, grab a card at the connection table, put on their head, I'd like to get baptized. We'll work something out with your schedule. We can do it here. We have done them often after celebration, right outside, have a big potluck, have cake. It's a great time. We can do them off-site. I know there's one of our ladies' connection groups was actually kicking baptism around. So we had a big baptism scheduled for last Monday at Guadalupe State Park. Unfortunately, the sky decided to baptize Guadalupe State Park for us, and it was underwater, so we weren't able to go up for Memorial Day and do that. But we can schedule them on-site, off-site, whatever works for you. But drop a note back there, and we will get that scheduled in the coming days as well. So lots of great stuff happening. Be sure to check the connection table if you're looking for a small group, connection group, that kind of thing. This morning, we're going to wrap up this series called Heroes of the Old Testament. We've been in it for, I think, 7 weeks now, where we've been kind of looking back through several heroes in the Bible, all in the Old Testament. We've learned some great truths. Last week, we dove into the life of a prophet named Elijah. And we learned several things. As Elijah was told by God to go tell Ahab, hey, the drought's coming, famine's coming, I'm bringing judgment. He said, Elijah, go hide for 3 years. So he takes off into the wilderness, hides for 3 years. God provides for his every need in the midst of famine in terms of food and water. And then 3 years later told Elijah, hey, now I need you to go back to the guy that's hunting your head. And I need you to let him know, I'm about to send rain, but we're going to do it on my terms. And crazy enough, Elijah was obedient. Right? This guy's hunting you. You're the most wanted man in all of the nation at this point. And he goes back and he tells Ahab. And through that story, man, we saw that you and I, no matter what's happening in our lives, no matter how much sense it seems to make, we can have an incredible trust in God because he is always, always faithful. We also saw in that story on the hill of Mount Carmel, and how quickly can other things get in the way of us worshiping only God. We said last week, he doesn't have to create us to worship in a satanic fashion as much as Satan just needs to get us distracted from worshiping only God. And when we add anything else to the mix, we're off course along the way. We saw last week that sincerity is as good a quality as it is. As much as we want to be sincere, we don't want to base our faith on sincerity, because like the prophets of Baal and Asherah, we can be sincerely wrong along the way. We saw last week that you and I have to see and receive the higher calling. This guy called Elijah, and God called the people of Israel to have a higher calling, to be his distribution center of the gospel. And we closed last week with this idea that, hey, no matter what, no matter where we are, we're going to have highs and lows, and we're going to have times in our life where we're like the Israelites, to be honest, and we've sort of walked away from God. And when we do, he says, just confess. And let's stop trying to run from God. Let's stop trying to act like God doesn't already know all the things that are happening in our lives. And let's just fall before him prostrate as the Israelites did when God consumed the sacrifice and the altar and the wood and all of the water. And they fell and just said, okay, God, I give. I'm done running along the way. And so as we wrap up the series, then we had our kids singing. We had a teenager that says, hey, I'm stamping the passport, I'm going. And I thought, let's look at a young man who was a miracle boy. He was a miraculous birth. His name is Samuel. It's in the scripture. Now here's what I want us to catch, though. As much as we're going to look at Samuel's life, there's actually 3 heroes in this story. And we'll get to them. His mother Hannah, who was willing to offer him to God as a servant. And then the priest Eli, who usually gets a bad rap. And we'll get to that along the way. But there's really 3 heroes in our story today that we're going to look into. So if you want to flip your Bible open to 1 Samuel chapter 3, or dial it in however you want to get to 1 Samuel chapter 3. While you're doing that, let me tell you a little bit about me. I do not have the gift of prophecy. And some people do in Scripture, I get it. I'm not very good at seeing into the future even. I'm kind of wired like an entrepreneur. So it's an interesting combination. Everywhere I've been, I've launched ministries and built ministries along the way, including launching HCC in 2009, launching a business last year. So I'm sort of wired to be one of those entrepreneur guys. But unlike many entrepreneurs, I don't have this like forecasting ability. I don't know whether it's a learned skill and I just haven't developed it. I don't know whether it's one of those deals that hey, I just need to ask God for more vision, for more of what it looks like. Now the good news is, I also don't tend to dwell in the past a whole lot. So in my house, I probably rarely ever take a picture. Now there are tons of pictures in my house. There are photo albums galore in our house. They're now all electronic. Our family loves to have, every night my wife looks forward to the whatever it is, Snapchat, something, pictures she gets of Amelia at night going to, she loves the pictures. And for me, it's like, I think I'm just so consumed with the present most of the time. I mean, I'm not dwelling on the past, but I have yet to also try to figure out how do I start to forecast the future as well as some entrepreneurs. Now, some of you guys may have that skill set. You may have it as an entrepreneur. Or I knew some other guys that had various surgeries or injuries, and they could tell you when the weather was about to change. Right? They had the ability to see it. Right? My bones hurt, my body hurts. I've had surgery and injury. We live in South Texas. It's hot. It's heat in the summertime, and I know it's hard to believe right now, but for the last 10 years, we've been in a drought. For 10 years. We've been literally praying summer after summer, God, would you send rain? And we're looking for lake parties and pool parties. And so there's all this heat that just builds up over the summer. And every once in a while, you'll be with one of those people and they'll say, hey, you know, it's about to rain. I look, I'm like, how do you know? Like, oh, my ankle hurts. I don't get it. Oh, yeah, I had surgery. I can tell you it's about to rain. And if you'll be still long enough after that, you can literally feel the air pressure begin to drop. Clouds will start to change, the wind begins to blow, and all of a sudden this aroma of rain, of freshness starts to blow through the air, and it's like they have an ability to predict change. I don't have that, but I do have a sense right now, and I just mean this with all my heart. I am sensing right now that there is a change coming in the church, capital C, as we know it in America in the postmodern culture. I think the wind is starting to blow, and there's a fresh wind coming, and I'm not sure, to be totally honest with you, what that change looks like, but I think it's coming. Right? There's a cleansing that comes with rain. Every time, and we've seen it. Some of you guys have been in the streets that have been flooded lately. And I got to tell you, when it's flooded, it's a mess. But after the rain comes and goes through, it is amazing how clean everything is behind. It's refreshing. It gives new life and new opportunity. And I am sensing that within the life of the church as we know it in a postmodern culture in our country. Now, I don't know what's coming exactly, but we're seeing bits and pieces of it. Things like technology. I mean, it's changing around us, you guys, by the way, whether we like it or not. So there are many pieces of this postmodern culture that have changed and are changing. And as a church, we have to figure out, hey, what's our spot in that? What does it look like? Technology is amazing in terms of how it's even helped churches. And we don't have to hold hymnals anymore. Right? And some of you are like, oh, I miss hymnals. And some of you are like, thank goodness, I've never held one. Right? It just depends on where you are in that spectrum. But technology's helped. Let me tell you what it's also done. It's also said, hey, you know, people can have an entire quote-unquote church experience online now, is what people are calling it. Now, we record every Sunday, almost. We throw it up online. We get it up there for folks to be able to see. I'm not against that at all. It is a great way to stay up to speed if we're in some sort of series and go, hey, I'm trying to get biblical knowledge because that makes sense. And by the way, we're not the only website. There's tons that you can gain biblical knowledge. But I have to tell you, me personally, I don't think you can have church online. I don't think there's any way to have church without presence of one another. Now, that's just my opinion. And I'm not bashing anyone or any place that happens to have church and an experience that way and are working in that endeavor. But for me, I think we need to be present, but things are changing. People are trying to do church that way. Culture isn't asking Ken most of the time. I'm not sure why. They just haven't asked my opinion. And I think for you and I, we are facing the fact that church as we know it is going to look radically different in the future, I think, than how many of us grew up experiencing it in some ways. There's new ways of thinking. People are doing things differently, even in the context of the church. And I'm sensing some change coming, and we're seeing it, articles being written. Why are all the millennials leaving the church? We're seeing articles being written, hey, the church in America is in decline, and I'll get to some of those towards the end. But what I want us to do is I want us to see a story in Scripture of what happens when this fragrance of change, when this aroma and the wind begins to blow of opportunity is from God. Because that's what happened in a young man's life named Samuel. Samuel was a wind and a breath of change that was given a vision by God, and we began to see this story. Now, again, I said to you a minute ago, I don't know what the change is. Here's what I do know. A big part of how we change, whatever that looks like, is the days, weeks, months, and years that come ahead. And we have to figure out in a culture that's crazily over busy and over scheduled, how do we continue to be a distribution center of the gospel in our world today? And I think we got to have a strategic plan on how we're going to experience discipleship. You and I looking more and more like Jesus every single day, and not by accident, not because we show up one time a week, but because you and I have a map and a strategy and a plan for how we sit down and gain biblical knowledge and education. Whether that's attending some classes, some Bible studies with friends, whatever it looks like, what we're reading and learning and studying and memorizing God's Word, because there is no way for this to shape our everyday if we don't know what's in it. So certainly that discipleship plan has to include that. It's got to include missional experience, starting with our children, where we pour into the lives of our kids and show them what it looks like to be the hands and feet of Jesus. Where we serve those in our schools and workplaces and neighborhoods and in common grounds as we go to Garner and Spanish Oaks and our city of San Antonio and ultimately to Jamaica and every other place that God can send us on the world. We need that missional experience to get out and be his hands and feet. And then I think we need one-on-one. One person, two people that have the right and the license to speak God's truth into me in love so that they can sharpen me and refine me and I can live more like Jesus. And one person that I am walking alongside and doing likewise in someone else's life. I think our strategy is going to have to include those. Now, what it looks like and how it all comes together, I got to tell you, at this point, I'm not sure. But I do know if we'll look at Samuel, if we will receive the aroma from him, if it's from him and we hear it correctly, man, it can bring about some awesome newness and some awesome opportunity for us to just continue to be his hands and feet. So let me tell you about this story of Samuel. Samuel literally was a miraculous child. This is his calling in commissioning here in 1 Samuel 3 to sort of be the prophet of the Old Testament. Now, he was born at a time that was huge and pivotal in the life of Israel. The country is literally sitting on the brink of change. So talk about no pressure, right? Your mom wasn't supposed to have kids. All of a sudden, you arrive and you're the prophet that has to transition God's entire nation in this huge pivotal moment. And the setting for Samuel backs up in the book of Judges. You don't have to flip there, but if you were to ever want to read it, God sent judges to help navigate those seasons where his people in Israel were having various challenges. And so you back up, you'll find the story there. But Israel is out of captivity. They've been there about 200 years. They start settling in. They arrived out of captivity with all this hope and anticipation and dreams and visions and all these things that they thought were coming. And then they start living in God's, as God's people in this new place. And then what happened is it begins to sort of wear off. Anybody been there? You go to camp in the summertime. You get all fired up. You come back. We start the school year. And by Christmas, we need another camp. Because for some of us, it kind of starts to wear off. That's God's people. They've been here 200 years with all these hopes and dreams. And it begins to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. And the people in Israel, the priests, were trying to keep them spiritually alive. They built sanctuaries and temples and places for them to go. But the truth of the matter is, the people saw less and less and less need for pursuing God in their lives because for whatever reason, it was becoming less relevant in their eyes. To where ultimately they started not worshiping God at all and just completely abandoned him in pursuit of their own personal gain. And as I was reading and getting ready for this week again, I thought, does that sound familiar? Doesn't that sound like our country? In many ways. Founded one nation under God. Had a season where we were passionately engaged in worshiping him. And over time, as that light beginning to get dimmer and dimmer and dimmer, as fewer and fewer and fewer people are seeing relevancy in pursuing God, instead pursuing their own personal gain. And so the last verse in Judges tells us, in those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did as they wanted to do. And so here's Samuel's arrival now. He comes on the scene. The first few chapters of Samuel tell us that his mom, Hannah, was barren. She was in extreme pain and grief and frustration and embarrassment, and she knew nothing else to do but to go to the temple, the sanctuary down in a city called Shiloh, and she just began to pour her heart out to God. And what's awesome, if you read through chapter 1, you start to see, hey, not only is she pouring her heart out to God for her own child, somehow in the dimness, Hannah had enough light in her to go, hey, God, this is an even bigger picture than just my child. Your people, your child, the nation of Israel needs some change. It needs hope. It needs new vision. So God, not only would you send him to me, but if you will send him to me, I will take and dedicate him to you and give him right back to you for his life of service and ministry. And we see that all the way through there in chapter 1. In fact, look at the story in 22 through 28 in chapter 1. Hannah didn't go. She said to her husband, after the boy is weaned, I will take him and present him before the Lord, and he will live there always. Do what's best for you. Her husband Elkanah told her, stay here until you have weaned him. Only may the Lord make good on his word. So the woman stayed at home and nursed her son until she weaned him. Verse 24. After he was weaned, she took the boy with her, young as he was, along with a 3-year-old bull, an ephah of flour, and a skin of wine, and brought him to the house of the Lord at Shiloh, the exact same place that she had been praying. When the bull had been sacrificed, they brought the boy to Eli and said to him, hey, pardon me, my Lord, as surely as you live, I am the woman who stood here beside you praying for the Lord. I prayed for this child, and the Lord granted me what I asked of him. So now I give him to the Lord. For his whole life, he will be given over to the Lord and worshipped the Lord there. She promised to dedicate her son to a life of ministry, a life of serving God. And so she took him right back to the very same temple where she had gone broken and poured her heart out and pleading to God and said, God, I'm going to bring him back. And so we have Hannah, the mother, who saw the need for the nation of Israel to have a new promise and a new hope and prayed for a child. We have Samuel, and then Eli enters the scene. And Eli is an old man, blind, almost at this point, right? We'll see that story here in just a minute, but his vision is almost gone. He's got 2 sons along the way. Eli's been the priest his entire life. Eli's dad was the priest there at Shiloh, passed it down to him, and Eli's plan was, hey, I will pass it down to my 2 boys until we get to chapter 2 and we find out, hey, what did God think of Eli's 2 boys? Look in verse 12 in chapter 2. Eli's sons were what? Scoundrels. They had no regard for the Lord. And his 2 sons were there in the temple skimming money out of the pot, skimming sacrifices away from the people. People would bring the sacrifices. They would take them and say, hey, that wasn't good enough. Go get another one. And his boys were scoundrels. And so in chapter 3, Samuel arrives at the scene. And it's way bigger than, hey, this young man is a miracle, born to a barren woman. It's way bigger than Samuel, who many of you, if you know much about Samuel, he had a reputation for being a guy who was willing as a prophet to go just say whatever God needed to be said, regardless of the consequences. Some of you guys may know people like that. I've been that guy, not necessarily in the name of Jesus sometimes, but I've been the guy that has said whatever needed to be said, regardless of the consequences. It's not a very popular place to be sometimes. I got friends in my life, they won't ask me my opinion. Because the truth is, they don't want my opinion. They want somebody that agrees with theirs. But I'm going to tell them what mine is, and it may be different. Samuel was that kind of guy, and we know that about Samuel. But check out this picture that we see in chapter 3 between Samuel and Eli. So we start in verse 1. The word of the Lord was rare in those days. There were not very many visions. I read that, and I thought, man, you just leave that one there for a second, Josh. What a picture of the nation of Israel in that time right there. And it's kind of depressing. And this is God's people. There weren't visions. God wasn't speaking to his people because they weren't listening. They weren't engaging in a journey with him at all. Verse 2, we see Eli's eyesight's failing him. It says there one night, Eli, whose eyes were becoming weak so that he could barely see, was lying down in his usual place. And in their culture, just for the record, blindness was often a metaphor for spiritual blindness as well. And so we kind of get a double picture here. Not only physically is he blind, but even Eli's spiritual leadership had begun to diminish along the way. His eyes weren't seeing what God wanted him to see. The beauty is there was hope. We see it in verse 3. The lamp of God had not yet gone out. And Samuel, here he is, lying down in the house of the Lord where the ark of God was. Right? It almost goes so far to say, hey, here they are at night. The story happens at night at a time representing the darkness. Not just in the own personal story of the birth of Samuel and the commissioning of him as a prophet, but the nation of Israel was dark. Yet the ark of the covenant, the lamp of God, were symbols of God's presence in the midst of the darkness. Even though it was small, there was a glimmer of hope for the nation of Israel. The lamp of God laid literally right there in the temple, waiting on an awakening from God's presence himself. Samuel was ready. He was the flicker of hope to bring light back into a nation. And in chapter 3, Samuel is ready. Now, how many of you have coached youth sports before? Lots of you have. How many of you, when you were coaching youth sports, had that kid that said, Coach, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go, I'm ready to go. And when you put them in the game, they have absolutely no idea where they're going. Yeah, by your laughter, I'm assuming some of you have been there like I have. That was Samuel. Coach, put me in, put me in, put me in. I know I'm your guy. I'm ready. And so he hears the voice of God. He goes running to Eli. Eli says, bro, I didn't call you to go back to bed. A second time, a third time, until finally Eli recognizes, oh, God must be calling Samuel. Samuel's a young boy. Samuel's a young prophet being commissioned here, being called by God to be God's agent of change. He had yet to learn how to recognize God's voice. It takes reps, doesn't it? It takes opportunities to pick his voice out of the many. I love the game that I do with teenagers all the time. It doesn't always turn out so well. But I'll take and divide them into teams. And you blindfold one person on each team, and depending on how big the group is, depends on how many teams there are, but there's usually 10, 15, 20 people on a team. One guy's blindfolded, and every team is competing against the other team. There's this huge obstacle course. We usually do it out in the woods. So there's this huge obstacle course. We put a cone on the other side, 50 yards or so down that way. And on the count of 3, their team has to guide the blindfolded person down around the cone and back. It's a great game. And so 1, 2, 3, boom! 100 people start screaming, and there's 10 guys trying to walk that can't see, and they're trying to pick it. And the team that wins every time is the team that figures out, hey, if we will all shut up and let one person give the instructions, then the person who's walking blindly can step with confidence that they are hearing the right voice. Isn't that how it is with God? Learning to distinguish his voice amongst the many. Samuel! Eli, which one? I didn't call you Samuel. He had to learn how to recognize his voice. We see it there in 4 through 10. The Lord called him Samuel, and he answered, here I am. He ran to Eli and said, here I am, you called me. Eli said, I didn't call you. Go back and lay down. So he went and lay down again. The Lord called Samuel. He got up, went to Eli and said, hey, here I am, you called me. My son, Eli, he said, I did not call you. Go back and lay down. Verse 7. Now Samuel did not yet know the Lord. The word of the Lord was not been revealed to him. A third time, the Lord called Samuel. Samuel got up and ran to Eli. He said, here I am, you called. Eli replied, the Lord was calling the boy. So he told Samuel, hey, go and lay down. If he calls you, say, catch this, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So Samuel went away and he laid down in his place. The Lord came and stood there, called the other time, Samuel, Samuel. Samuel said, speak, for your servant, Lord, is listening. Right? God gives Samuel a message of change. He learned how to hear his voice. He tells Samuel, hey, by the way, Samuel, Eli and his sons are about to be removed from leadership in the temple and leadership in the nation. Imagine how well Samuel slept that night. He'd already been awoken 4 times. Eli knew that the Lord had woken him, so hey, when Eli gets up, where's he coming? Straight into the room. Hey, bro, what did he say? That's exactly what happens. His fear came true. Look here in verse 17. What was it that he said to you, Eli asked. But do not hide it from me. May God deal with you, be it ever so severely, if you hide anything from me that he told you. All right, bro. So Samuel went on to tell him everything the Lord had said. You know what's incredible? Is Eli's reaction wasn't anything like Samuel would have thought. But I think what most of us would have thought. In verse 18, Eli said, well, he is the Lord. Let him do what is good in his eyes. And Eli had enough faith, even as dim as it was, to recognize still the hand and the work and the voice of God. So much so that he knew that this young boy was God's agent of change, and he was being asked to usher him in and usher the nation of Israel into this next season of life, knowing it meant the removal of himself and his very own family along the way. What a powerful, powerful picture of how we need both. Right? Samuel was there. He was ready. He was gung-ho and eager and young. But he so needed the older Eli to help him learn and understand, hey, how do I hear your voice? Eli, I got to tell you, Eli doesn't get depicted in this story as the hero very often. And I get it. We want to talk about Samuel most of the time and Eli, right? He didn't have any huge military victory. He didn't have any huge building accomplishments. Eli never preached a famous sermon. Eli's 2 sons led the nation of Israel completely away from worshiping God. And so in one sense, I'm like, man, I get it. It makes sense that Eli isn't the hero. But I have to tell you, man, I think Eli did a phenomenal job in this latter season of his life of hearing God's voice, pouring it into God's agent of change for God's people in the nation of Israel. And and allowing that transition from the past to the future to happen. I think he did a great job of that. He was the one that gave Eli the tools that he needs along the way. And honestly, I think he served God well. I think he probably looked a lot like us. He had his own junk in his life. There were days, weeks, months, years perhaps, that his junk stood in the way of his own personal journey with God. And walking where God would have him walk every day. But he reconnected with God in a way that literally helped change the nation of Israel. I think we need more people like Eli in the world. More people who are willing to not necessarily be the hero out front. We've got some of you guys. We've got some Elis in this church. And they're not old and blind necessarily. But they're right behind the scenes, willing to pour wisdom. They don't have to be the Samuel that's up in front all the time, but they're just steadily working back behind the scenes, saying, okay, God, you bring the new Samuels into the world. You bring the Samuels into leadership here. You bring Samuels into leadership of our country, of the church globally. God, we will be Eli and continue to pour the wisdom on how to do that. And then we will roll with the plan of however it is, God, that you want to use us to be your church in this culture and in this community. I think we need more Elis, and I think we need more Samuels. I think we need more of us that are listening for his voice. More of us that would literally go to the temple and surrender our lives and say, God, here am I. So when he calls, we don't say, hey, hold on a minute. I'm a little busy right now. It's 3 in the morning. I got too many things on my plate, God. There's no way I can afford to go to Jamaica. There's no way that we could make this happen in our family. Whatever the case, when he calls, can we get to the place that our response is speak, Lord. Your servant is listening. Your servant is listening. I can't help but think of the changes that they must have experienced, both separately and together along the way. What a model and a picture that they paint for us. To say, hey, listen, it takes both, you guys. How often have we been the new young leader that walks in and thinks the old guy just needs to get his stuff and get out of the office? Because we're all having a bag of chips. And we need their wisdom to help us understand, hey, how do we hear God's word? And we have an extremely young church, age-wise, demographically. You guys, can I tell you, we need the elder folks in our church and more of them to be Elis for us, to show us what it looks like to have an unbelievably healthy marriage when we're 60 years old. To show us how to put our finances in position that when we're 60, we can continue to function on into 70 and 80 if God will allow us to live that long. To help us navigate children that we don't know what to do with. All those things, we need them along the way. And then corporately as a church, we need them. I'm telling you, I am sensing in postmodern culture in this country, God is doing something in the church. And I believe it is a fresh wind and a fresh aroma if we will find his presence amongst it. Now it's changing, you guys. So hear me. 2014, average church attendance for a Christian in our country was 1.3 Sundays a month. And it doesn't look necessarily like church, capital C, looked when I was a kid, where we framed and shaped our entire lives socially, and what we did and when we did, and what we put on the calendar wrapped around what we were doing with church and our friends at church in that community. It looks different today than it's ever looked. But amidst all of that, I'm going to tell you, if you go back to verse 3, I believe there is a flicker of flame that is ready to be fanned. I believe there is hope for the church in postmodern culture in this country. That you and I, if we will realize that our faith And our hope in any new things that he brings to his church will only become because of his presence in our lives. And we need to usher him in. And we need to seek him. And we need to put our ears to the ground. And we need to say, God, if you want to use me as Eli, use me as Eli. If I'm too old and I'm looking backwards and you need to usher change in, then God, I am ready to be an Eli to a young Samuel. And God, if I'm a young Samuel and ready to be a change agent in this country that will lead your people back into a deeper, more powerful, more meaningful, everyday relationship with you through your word and through your people so that we can function as his distribution center of the gospel and look more like him every single day. Then I pray that our prayer would just simply be, God, when you speak, your servant is listening. It's sort of, for me, like looking out yesterday afternoon, about 2 o'clock. We got out of the swimming pool. And we watched the sky begin to go from beautifully sunny to darker and darker and darker. And the wind began to pick up. And the air pressure began to drop. And the fragrance of a beautiful summer storm began to blow in. I think he is blowing that kind of life into this church. And it won't come without risk. It won't come without you and I being willing to belly up to the table and say, hey, the Lord has called me to do X, Y, or Z. Think about Samuel. He laid all night awake. I know he's coming back. Eli's going to ask. I got to be willing to tell him. It won't come without risk. And for the record, can I tell you now? If we are responding to him, you speak, Lord, your servant's listening. Everyone we go to share and tell and do with won't like it. It's okay. It's part of the process. Will we allow the sweet fragrance of his presence to blow through not only our lives, through the life of his church here. And say, God, whatever you choose, I'll be your Eli, I'll be your Samuel. Your servant is listening and ready. And my commitment to you is I am keeping 2 ears to the ground and listening for him and watching as the weather changes and saying, God, we cannot get away from who you are and what you are. But man, if you need to morph and change the way we do things and how we function and where we go and what we do and what time and all, God, you speak. We will go so that you can bring a fresh new life into this country. Let's pray with me. And God, thank you for man, what a picture. What a story of, man, just your reminder of that you never stop pursuing this. God, your people were done. They were walking away from you. There was very little vision and hope, of very little communication of you to them because they weren't listening. And I think, God, how much of that resembles our culture? But God, you were still in pursuit. God, I thank you for the Hannahs in the world that are willing to not only invest in the lives of their own children, Father, but they are willing to take them and lay them at the altar and surrender them to you. In Hannah's case, at a very, very, very young age, just barely weaning him off and saying, God, he is all yours. God, there are many who have young children that I get a chance to talk to. And those young children say, hey, I'm feeling led to missions. I'm feeling led to serving God with all of my life in ministry. And moms and dads are often reluctant. No, there's a better job for you. You can give to that or you can do that every once in a while. But this is what you need to do with your life in order to get it in order. God, thank you for the Hannahs that hear your voice and just take and lay them at your feet, knowing that her own personal sacrifice. God, I thank you for the Samuels in our lives. For the Samuels in the life of your church. For those who have and will usher in the coming change. The coming days ahead. smart enough to know that the church, as we know it corporately, may not look and feel the same way 20 years from now, 30 years from now, that it looks and feels. But God, may we never depart from your word and your truth and your love and your grace and your mercy. And would you challenge all of us in this room to experience more of it every single day and be that distribution center. And God, lastly, I thank you for the Eli's. Thank you for those that have spent countless hours, days, months, years pouring in time, energy, money, a lifetime of learning and loving people. And God, it's hard sometimes for the Eli's that know the change is coming to not want to look back. Would you give us eyes that see you and hear you? And as we look back and remember, we allow that to usher in what you're doing in a fresh wind, in a fresh aroma. And God, I got to tell you, my heart and my prayer personally is that it would ignite revival in our lives personally. That it might ignite revival in this church, Heights Community Church, in this city, San Antonio, and ultimately all around the world. And that's our prayer. In precious name I pray. Amen. I guess my challenge would be to just pray this week and ask yourself, am I an Eli? Am I Samuel? Am I both? Depending on what area of our lives we're talking about, whether it's at work, church, with our children, with our grandchildren, with our friends, with our neighbors. And we need them all. Let's not miss an opportunity to keep our ears down. Hear his voice. And if you hear him calling, by the way, speak. Lord, your servants, listen. And if you're not sure it's his voice, then go find an Eli. Hey, this is happening. Can you tell me, am I nuts? Am I crazy? I don't know. Let's go to his word. Let's open it up. So that wraps up our Hero series. Next week, we're going to start something really fun. We're going to do for the next 3 summers, actually. So we're going to spend 10 weeks for the next 3 summers walking through the book of Romans together. We're going to make it in 10 weeks through a whopping 4.5, maybe 5 chapters. If we're lucky, we'll get to the end of chapter 5. We've kind of got it laid out through the course of the summer. We're going to do every week in Romans what I would call an individual week. So we're going to dive into various sections. And if you're gone on vacation and whatever, if you can catch it online, great. If it's something you want to do, but we're going to try not to connect the dots so that you have to be here the 2 previous weeks in order to be able to understand, because we know everybody's schedules kind of goes a little bit all over the place as we wrap up school, people start vacations and families. So we'll kick off a brand new series out of the book of Romans. If you want to read chapter 1, we'll be just in 1 through 13 next weekend. So that's 2 verses a day. For those of you mathematicians that want to get in there and get it done, we'd love to have you read that with us. We're headed to Jason's Deli over by North Star Mall for lunch, so just a sweet time of fellowship. Otherwise, well, let me say this. Braden has been with us for a long time. Probably 2 years full time, and then maybe another year or so. Maybe you were with your pops, something like that. And so Braden has been serving alongside us for the last 2 years full time. He is graduating. He's headed on a quick trip with family, and then headed to run sound for a Christian camp this summer. And then in the fall, who knows, he may be working for the government, for our Army full time, as an audio engineer, college, all those kinds of things. But what we know is he said, hey, with all my schedules, this is the last Sunday I can be on the board every week. So we want to say thank you for that. He's not old and he's not blind, but he's one of those quiet Eli's that just sits back and is happy to be off to the side in his little cubby hole and silently plugging it in and silently unplugging it. But we all know if he doesn't do his job, because everybody else is silent too along the way. But he's done a great job, so we're grateful. Last thing is, Mateo will be out at the table. So if you're just interested to hear more about his journey to Jamaica, how you can pray for him, what that looks like, be sure to stop by there on the way out. Other than that, have a blessed week. I'll be down front. We'd love to say